Well, greetings. It's good to see you again. You look really good. Hey, join me in another passage from the book of Genesis. There's an interesting story in chapter 32, and there's a segment of it in verses 1 and 2. It says, Jacob also went on his way, and the angels of God met him. When Jacob saw them, he said, "This is the camp." In Hebrew, it's plural, camps, more than one, of God. So he named the place Mahanaim. Now, Mahanaim is a real place, and they've identified that. I think I have a picture of it in the process here. We'll come to that in a little bit. Let's pick the story up, however, at verse 20. How about 22? That night, Jacob got up and took his 2 wives, his 2 maidservants, and his 11 sons, and crossed the ford of Jabbok. It's interesting. Water barriers are significant in cultures all over the world. And here's one, and Jacob needs to get himself and all of his possessions across a river. Now, this is not a real big river, but it is a river. Verse 23, after he had sent them across the stream, he sent over all his possessions. So Jacob was left alone, and a man wrestled with him till daybreak. When the man saw that he could not overpower him, he touched the socket of Jacob's hip. That's an interesting verse, and I've always wondered just what the revelation in that is. And so I want to struggle with that and see if we can kind of get some insights into what that is all about. I'm continuing there. So that his hip was wrenched as he wrestled with the man. Then the man said, "Let me go, for it is daybreak." But Jacob replied, "I will not let you go unless you bless me." An interesting request. Verse 27, the man asked him, "What is your name?" "Jacob," he answered. Then the man said, "Your name will no longer be Jacob, but Israel, because you have struggled with God and with men and have overcome." Jacob said, "Please tell me your name." But he replied, "Why do you ask my name?" Then he blessed him there. So Jacob called the place Peniel, saying, "It is because I saw God's face. I saw God face to face, and yet my life was spared." And then there's a kind of a concluding little parenthetical thing here. The sun rose above him as he passed Peniel, and he was limping because of his hip. Therefore, to this day, the Israelites do not eat the tendon attached to the socket of the hip, because the socket of Jacob's hip was touched near the tendon. Touched. Specific word. Near the tendon. Specific place. What does all that mean? Well, let's get into the passage of Jacob wrestling with an angel. The word angel means messenger or helper or something like that. So it could be most anything. It's not particularly a helpful word, but Jacob calls him God later when he names the place Peniel. I start here. It seems to me that 3 things have happened before this wrestling match. One of them, as we mentioned in the beginning of the chapter, the angels of God met Jacob as he was on his way back from Haran. He's on his way back to Shechem, and he needs to get across a couple of rivers. One of them is the Jabbok, the other one will be the Jordan. And these angels do not meet him to counter or resist. It seems they meet him to welcome and maybe to accompany. At any rate, the incident just simply says that the angels of God met him. Now, Jacob had gone east to find a wife. So he was running away from Esau. His mother insisted he go back to her family to find his wife, and so he had done all of that, and he got not one wife, but four actually, and now he's on his way back. He is returning in a westwardly, largely southerly, but also some westwardly. So we talked about the symbolism in the Bible that when you go east, you're going away from God. When you go west, you're going back to God. Jacob recognizes that he is on holy ground when the angels meet him here. And he named the place Mahananim, camps of God. A second thing that happens is that Jacob prayed. Now, he had heard from God and he may have talked with God, but here we have a specific prayer. You can imagine that he was anxious about meeting Esau and had a lot of fear raging inside of himself, but he is alone in God's presence, and it is here that he humbles himself to confess and ask for help. His prayer specifically, verses 9 to 12, are this: O God of my father Abraham, God of my father Isaac, O Lord, and he uses the YHWH there, the high and holy name of God, who said to me, go back to your country and your relatives, and I will make you prosper. I am unworthy of all the kindness and faithfulness you have shown your servant. I had only my staff when I crossed this Jordan, but now I have become two groups. Save me, I pray, from the hand of my brother Esau, for I am afraid he will come and attack me, and also the mothers with their children. But you have said, I will surely make you prosper, and will make your descendants like the sand of the sea, which cannot be counted. So he relies on God's promise, and yet he has some almost paralyzing fears as he comes to face his brother Esau. The third thing is that he sent all of his possessions on ahead of him, and he was alone as he was about to cross this river Jabbok. So I want to first of all just think with you a little bit about crossing barriers, water barriers. Water barriers are difficult sometimes, and it can be challenging getting across them. I lived alongside the Columbia River, and one has to drive a long ways to find a bridge across that river. But in ancient days, there were ferries that took wagons and people and so on across the river, but those are major challenges for society. Jabbok is not particularly a large river, unless of course it's a flash flood or at flood stage, but there is a ford where crossing is a little less challenging. Now here are a couple of pictures. The one on the right, upper right, the near here is Mahanaim that we're talking about. He named this place, this hill on the right above the Jabbok, and out there in the other ravine is the Jordan River. And then down in the ravine, on the lower left, a closer picture of what the Jabbok river would look like. It's not a big river, but again, to get all the animals and possessions and family across would be a process. So it is here then at the Jacob, at the Jabbok, that Jacob wrestles with God. The writer has put a little thing in here that we miss because of our English translation, but in the Hebrew there's a play on words. Jabbok, Jacob, and wrestle all have similar sounds in Hebrew. So the author is using a play on words to highlight the revelation that he's trying to communicate to us. And the question then is, what is the revelation? Well, this passage about a struggle, a wrestling match, epitomizes Jacob's life. Jacob was driven by a need, and the question is, what was his driving need? Well, he had struggled to get a blessing all of his life. He struggled with his older brother and cheated him out of the birthright. He struggled with his father and had to lie to his dad to get the birthright. He struggled with his uncle Laban and cheated him out of some estate. Perhaps, they each apparently cheated each other. And now he has come here and he struggles with God. And God comes in the form of an angel. But he struggles for, again, a blessing. Now, he had cravings for lots of things. He had gone up to Haran to find a wife. But even with 4 wives, women didn't satisfy the craving that he had. He comes away with a large family, but a large family didn't satisfy the innate craving he felt. He had lots of animals, sheep and donkeys and camels and oxen apparently. And so he was a wealthy man when he left his uncle's place. But wealth didn't seem to satisfy the craving that he felt. So what is it, or what was it that he craved so badly? And it seems to me that what he really craved was God's blessing. In Hebrew, the word blessing has to do with life. And so what he really wanted is a right standing with God whereby he could really live. And it's called blessing in Hebrew. So Jacob has a wrestling nature, we might say. And wrestling was his modus operandi, or operandi, because he used it several times. Yes, he used strategy and effort and sometimes deceit. He used cunning, always to get what he wanted his way. And in the process, he damaged people and he damaged relationships. Now, what we know is that God had made a promise to Abraham, repeated the promise to Isaac, and he repeated the promise to Jacob. God had said, I'll protect you and I will bless you. But it wasn't enough for Jacob to wait on God and God's timing. You know, we're a lot like that. We sometimes want to hurry and get what we want, and we'll cheat or we'll push and shove and we'll climb over people. We'll damage people. Jacob wanted to get a blessing his way in his time, and he was a strong man in several ways. So he attempted to wrest a blessing from his brother and then from his father, and then from his uncle, and finally now he is wrestling with God. But in each case, Jacob tends to do damage to others. Now, Jacob is pictured for us as a strong man. I have had a tendency, perhaps you have too, to think of him as a mama's boy, in contrast to Esau, which was, hairy and an outside kind of a guy, the hunter type. Jacob, however, seemed to have unusual physical strength, and I derived that from the story. When he arrives at Haran, there are some sheep herders gathered around a well, and they're waiting to water their flock. And Jacob asks them what they're waiting for, and they tell him that they need to all be there to move the rock. It was a large rock, we're told, at the mouth of the well. But Jacob walks over and single-handedly moves that large rock. They had to wait until all the sheep herders were there to do it, but Jacob can do it all alone. So Jacob seems to have had strength, and he seems to be a strong man. Now, in this case, he's wrestling with an angel, and it may not just picture physical strength. Maybe it pictures for us strength of will. We might call it stubbornness or tenacity. Anyway, in verse 25, we have this comment, when the man saw that he could not overpower him. Now, wait, if this is God, God doesn't have any trouble with power. He can put somebody down. But you see, God never imposes his will on anyone. So, like with Pharaoh, it says God hardened his heart. And what that is really saying is that God enabled him to do what he really wanted to do. He wanted to say no to Moses. He wanted to keep the Israelites as slaves. And so God helped him do what he just naturally wanted to do. And here also, it may be that God is not going to steamroller him. He could not overpower him, not because he lacked the strength, but because God doesn't just run over somebody. God wants us to cooperate with him. And he made us as free moral agents. And so I find this a different little twist than I often have had. So this picture of Jacob becomes a kind of a mirror in which I see myself, and you probably see yourself as well. You see, I believe that all of us at times tend to wrestle with God also. Sometimes scheming and sometimes struggling. We do it with others. We start off with our parents, and then we move on to employers and whoever else. And we do it with God. You see, sometimes we cheat and lie a little bit. We blame others or we blame God, and we always excuse ourselves and deny our dark side instead of confessing who we really are, in God's presence particularly. So we bargain and deal in an attempt to gain and acquire and get our way. But what we crave is exactly what God promises and delights in giving us, if we will trust him. We all crave blessing. We want life and we want to live it well. But like Jacob, we need to confess our nature before God can forgive us, cleanse us, use us, fill us, all of these Bible words. Sometimes we have to be weakened before the fight goes out. I've seen a lot of people who have fought God all their lives, and as they get old, they become weak and the fight goes out. And some finally honestly surrender to God and find victory and find what they always wanted in life. Now, all of that is tucked away in there, but I haven't gone into this part about what was it that God touched, or what happened as a result of God's touching Jacob's hip joint. I think I want to pick that up next week. So if you'll join me next week, I'm going to stop here for right now, and then I'll pick this theme up, and we'll talk about this wrestler wrestling with God and what the result was, what it might have been anyway. And one of the commentaries said that neither Jew nor Christian can tell us what it was. And yet I think I found some nuggets and some insights. So join me again next week. Thanks for being here. God bless you.